Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and it's full review time. This is an Olamic Whippersnapper. The Olamic Whippersnapper is a model from Olamic that I had handled a couple of times at shows, but hadn't owned yet, and has kind of been on my list for a long time. And I'm excited to finally be reviewing it. I should say as well, if you're like, wasn't there supposed to be a first impressions and this is all of a sudden a full review? Yes, you are correct. Because of my Utah trip and just timing, I missed the boat on my first impressions. I carried it quite a bit on my trip. By the time I got back, it was like not really, wouldn't honestly be a first impressions anymore. And so I skipped that. We're just going right to the full review. My first impressions were good. Let me say that. But yeah, so I had been interested in the Whippersnapper for quite a while, especially after handling one, which was a good sign, because if I wanted one and then handled it and wanted it less, then that would probably not be a good indicator, right? But after holding one at California Custom Knife Show, I was like, man, I got to get one. And then I had a few friends who got some and raved about them. And so it was probably really only a matter of time. But this one, I got pretty lucky because Kevin, LeftyEDC, who I will link down below, he got this in some kind of sweet trade that he did, and he ended up sending it to me under the condition that if I liked it, I could buy it from him, or if I decided I just didn't feel ultimately the need to have one after reviewing it, that I could just send it back to him. Newsflash, I bought it from him. I'm keeping this knife because I really, really like it. It's just quite nice. And I've raved about Olamic before. I feel like Olamic is somehow still just kind of a sleeper brand, and I don't really know why. Sometimes I scratch my head as to why Olamic doesn't get more love in the community. I'm sure some people must have some complaints and negative things to say about Olamic as a company, but I honestly don't. Not yet. I haven't had any issues with any of the knives that I've owned, and I've owned a few. I've had 3 or 4 Wayfarers at this point. Let me try to think through it. I got the first one at California Custom Knife Show the first time that I went. It was a sheep's foot, or sheep's cliff, is that what they call it? Yeah, sheep's foot, Warncliffe. That's what they call it, sheep's cliff. Yeah, I think all of the ones that I've had have been, to be fair. So I got that one, and then I've had the one I traded my Bounty Hunter Ultra Tech for with the Hellhound blade. That was nice. It had like a fancy inlay on it. It was too fancy though for me. And then I've had another one. I've had another one that I reviewed here on the channel. I think it was just a trade that I did, and then I ended up letting it go because I was chasing something else. But I've owned a few Wayfarers, and I've loved them all. They're genuinely fantastic knives. The ergos on the Wayfarer, for my hand, are one of my favorite knives that are out there. I just love the way that knife feels in my hand. And then I've had a Swish as well, and I loved the Swish. I think I sold my first Wayfarer and my Swish, if I'm remembering correctly, to help fund my SIG P226, which I don't really regret because I love that gun. But anyway, I do miss that knife. The Swish is really great. I'd love to get another one at some point. So I got this from Kev and started carrying it, and pretty immediately was like, yeah, freaking, I like this. I was right. It is good. Olamic is a cool brand in the sense that they make these knives, and basically the way they work is they have these like parts cut in Italy, and then they're all brought over here to the States. Their shop is actually here in California, and they do all of the finishing work here. I'm not sure if they do any of the grinding or anything like that. I want to say they just have the stuff water jet cut overseas. But they do all of the, like, this one has speed holes, and sometimes they do crazy stuff on the back spacers, and they do like sculpting all over, and they do crazy anodization and different finishes, and they do a ton of really, really interesting stuff all here. And so they're not like a full American knife company, which is, I think, frankly, why they're not really in the conversation with knives like CRK and Hinderer and Strider, but I think they should be. I prefer I prefer Olamic to any of those knives. Hinderer is probably second. That's what I would say, but these knives they play kind of in that same price range, and they come from a shop here in California, and they're just really, really nice. They do fantastic jobs with their detents. Olamic has this special sensation in the detent that I just can't really, like, it's hard to even compare it to something else. They're not drop shutty, which is normally something that I love, but they're very smooth. And see, this one, if I'm not careful, will drop onto my thumb. So I try to give it that little push down there instead of having it free drop to my thumb. But they have like this snappy but smooth, glossy, I don't know, it's a really cool action. So yeah, I like the brand a lot. And here I am way too deep in this video without talking about this one specifically. So let me leave that there. And we're going to go into ergos, carry, cutting, all that stuff with this knife. So ergonomically, first and foremost, you can see you've got a couple of grip options on this knife. You can choke back here, which is frankly pretty comfortable. I do not mind this grip at all, but you see you've got a generous forward choil up here. That I love. This makes this knife feel frankly large and capable, even though your cutting edge is, as you can see, quite small. I've got tape schmutz on here from opening packages earlier. But yeah, with this forward choil, these ergos are money. You've got a really smooth spine up here. It's not crowned, but it's like chamfered really well. And so, I don't know, it's just, I love choking up like this. I get a really cool controlled sensation over this little Wharncliffe blade, and it's very, very comfortable. So in a saber grip, choked up, super comfortable. Hammer grip even, choked up, very comfortable. Saber grip choked back, comfortable. Hammer grip choked back, comfortable. Draw cut, comfortable. Reverse grip, actually fairly comfortable. Not the best, but it's doable. Reverse grip draw cut, it's okay. Not the most common grip anyways, but it's not terrible. You could use it that way. So ergonomically, I dig this knife. That forward choil, the ability to choke up like this and just have a ton of control over that little cutting edge, oof, I like it. If you look at this like proportionally, I can see some people would probably be like, it's not enough blade for how much handle there is. But honestly, that's, I don't know. I love a really good blade to handle ratio. Like when it seems like impossible how much cutting edge there is inside of a handle when it deploys, that really makes me excited sometimes. But I also love having a really full-size handle with a small capable blade because you just get so much control over it. And yeah, we're going to talk about cutting, but the ergos play into a lot of why I like this knife in its cutting performance. All right, so ergos are good. Let's talk action, because this knife is multiple deployment methods. As you can see, it's meant to be a front flipper. Action should be a shining star on this knife, and honestly, it is. This front flipper is one of the easiest to use. I say that as I fudge it because I'm holding it all funky. It's just snappy. You've got tons of room up here, so you can just grab on. It's jimped in a really nice way so you don't slip off of it. It's just very, very easy to use and satisfying too. And then on top of it having that front flipper tab, which you can play with all day long, it's also got a hole. And so you can middle finger flick it, which is fantastic. I assume you can also thumb flick it. Yes, you can. I think I've done that before. If you know me, you know that the majority of time that I open this knife, it's middle finger flicking. This hole works fantastic for it. It's excellent in that way. And then again, we have already talked about closing action. It's not drop shutty, but it's like glassy, very smooth, very, very smooth all the way along. And every Olamic that I've had so far has been that way. It seems like their detent is really designed to be deployment focused to get the blade out of the handle. And then on closure, they've made it incredibly smooth, but their focus just isn't to make knives drop shutty. That said, this knife is on bearings, and it's stupid smooth. So, all right. Yeah, action is a total win. What's interesting, too, now that I'm looking in here, is it's got like these two, like, stops, standoffs. Like, instead of having one stop pin, it's got two down in there. I don't know if you can see that, which is just interesting. It looked like it was easier to see. Yeah, like that. So it looks like one is for closed and one is for open. I don't know how I just noticed that right now and didn't before, but that's cool. So yeah, action's great. Let's talk carry. Carrying this knife, I will say, is quite good. It's really slim in this direction, which is one of the biggest indicators of whether a knife is going to be comfortable in pocket. For me, I love knives that are slim this way. It's a little wide or tall this way, right? Especially here. You can see with this blade shape, you've just got a big hump that way. But honestly, I've carried this knife as a secondary. I think every single time that I've carried it. It might have snuck in my pocket as a primary once. Yeah, I think on my trip in Utah it did when I was just around the house for the day. But yeah, this knife in pocket, in my back pocket specifically, the width hasn't bothered me yet. The only thing that I would say I would love is if it sat a little deeper. So you do have, for how relatively small, like short blade length this knife is, just seems like kind of a lot of knife sticking out of your pocket. I prefer loop over style deep carry clips. That's my thing. Olamic doesn't do that on any of their knives, but I would love it if this knife had a loop over deep carry clip and it could just kind of disappear in my pocket a little bit more. The lanyard hole also, I don't know, it's going to have, even if this was a loop over clip, you'd still have that peak because of seemingly just the lanyard hole there that sticks up. But it carries comfortably. The clip has great retention. It goes in and out of pocket well. Like, there's nothing really negative about the carry on this knife other than, for my preference, I'd prefer for it to sit a little deeper, and it is objectively a little tall this way, right, because of that hump in the blade. But it hasn't bothered me, so I'm not going to knock it for that. Yeah, so carry's pretty good. Now, the last category is going to be cutting. Cutting performance on this guy, I've been super happy with. It's a nice, tall, flat grind, and it's got a fantastic edge on it. I'm assuming this is still the factory edge. I don't know, because I'm not the first owner of this knife, and Kevin wasn't either, but it's a very sharp edge that's on here. And with that tall, flat grind and this tip, which is kind of a worn cliff, but still comes to quite a pokey little tip, I've just found secondary knives for me, with the category that this fits in, are, my expectations of them are basically to do like around the house, relatively light duty type of stuff. Opening a lot of, it's late, opening a lot of packages and processing cardboard, and like I open a lot of toys for my daughter, getting into like nooks and crannies of things and popping little rubber bands that hold Barbies into packages and like stuff like that. I also like when they're capable, if I need them to be, to cut an apple, stuff like that. I have actually I think I've cut 2 apples with this knife so far actually, and it's done pretty well. The blade stock is not super thin, but it's not overly thick either. And this full flat just makes it a pretty slicey profile. It's not the sliciest knife I've ever felt. It's not the thinnest behind the edge, but it's a very good blade profile. The geometry is good. It's using M390, 20 CV, same thing. And yeah, I haven't had any issues yet with edge retention or performance in any way. I just like it. And when you pair that blade grind, and frankly the size, with these ergos, and being able to get all the way up here comfortably, it's just so, I don't know, it feels so controlled to do anything you got to do. And having so much handle for this little blade just gives you the ability to do these interesting grips and just use this for nice stuff. Things that other knives would feel so much more cumbersome to do. It reminds me of like Ben Peterson, who I even talked to him on the podcast about this, but like he's got that rule, right, where he needs to be able to reach forward and touch the tip. And this would pass that test for sure. And so when you're doing these little cuts where you're just kind of dragging through things, it feels so convenient to use in situations like that. So yeah, I really, really dig it. My money's where my mouth is. I paid Kevin for this knife already. I'm keeping it. This is mine now. And I had the option to just send it back to him and it would have all been the same. So I think that speaks volumes about how much I like this knife. It feels really high quality too, and I mean, Kevin gave me a bro deal, so that definitely helped me to want to buy it. But this knife is just so nice, and Olamics always feel so nice to me. They feel nicer than Hinderers or CRKs or Striders or the other knives that play in this like $400 to $600 price range, right? And granted, they're not completely US made, but they're at least partially US made by some guys that I've met and are cool. And they also offer so much more customization than just about anybody else on the scene. Like I could literally, and I've talked about this before, I could take this knife, I could reach out to him and tell him, hey, I want to send this in and have you completely change not just the anodization color, but I want you to sculpt this backspacer and I want you to change the finish. I want it to be like the, what do they call that finish? There's one that looks kind of bark-like. Kinetic Rain, I think they call it. That might be wrong. Anyway, I could have him change the surface finish, the color, probably a different clip. I could have him add Timascus to it, all this stuff. And I could just send it into him and have him do that stuff. And the cost to have them do it wouldn't be crazy, considering the amount of work it would be. And they're typically really fast at that kind of stuff. And so the fact that they make these really, really cool knives, but then after the point of sale, that they keep offering services like that and that they'll do things like that for their customers is just really cool to me. I've only ever had, I think, one buddy who he was active duty military and brought his knife, he had a Wayfarer, overseas with him. And when he got back, there were some things on it that were just like, he had used it hard. It was the folder that was in his pocket for months. And he sent it to them for like warranty work, and they just completely like took care of it and got that knife to where it was like new. Like, not just like put a fresh edge on it and like tuned it a little, but like refinished the whole thing and just like called it warranty. And just really cool stuff like that. I don't know. I dig them. I think they're cool. And I'm sure some people have been frustrated with them at some point over something. That's going to happen in the comments. But my experience, from everything I've perceived and my own personal experiences, have been very, very positive with Olamic so far. So, I don't know. I just like them. I like this one in particular. It's the only one I own right now. I don't have any others. So, this is a really, really cool Olamic. It's the Whippersnapper. Again, Kevin LeftyEDC will be linked down below. I'll link Olamic down below as well. So if you haven't checked them out, do. And yeah, thanks for checking it out, guys. That'll be it.